Welcome to the first of many collab videos to come between Inmate Tea with AMP and Blacklight Mass Incarceration Show. I'm April, and on the line is my co-host P with Inmate Tea with AMP.
I'm Sierra. I am the host of Blacklight Mass Incarceration Show, and welcome to this episode.
Yes, we are excited. Before we begin this episode and this conversation that we're about to have, we want to take a moment to say that our hearts and deepest condolences go out to the families, friends, and communities impacted by all three of the tragedies that we'll be discussing today. No words can ease that kind of pain, and we speak today not to sensationalize what happened, but to search for understanding and hopefully prevention. We'll be looking at three tragic North Carolina cases. A young man released from prison who took his own life after killing his aunt. A schizophrenic man whose illness was ignored until it turned deadly. And a Marine veteran whose untreated trauma led to a mass shooting. These stories all point to the same crisis: untreated pain and systemic neglect, and they force us to ask why. In a country that talks so much about justice and freedom, but so many are still fighting invisible wars with their own minds. Let's talk about it, and we're about to pour the tea on this conversation. First, we're going to start out with the tragic case of 26-year-old Tytion Burton in Statesville, North Carolina, which has gone largely unnoticed by mainstream media despite its heartbreaking circumstances and the deeper story it reveals about mental health and incarceration. According to reports, Tytion fatally shot his aunt outside her home before taking his own life. Miss Burton, a respected minister and bishop designate of Freedom Church International, had publicly shared her love and support for her nephew just weeks earlier. Posting about his recent release after serving 8 years in prison, she wrote that much of his early young adult life years were gone from us, but that she had his back no matter what. While the public was left with only headlines about another tragedy, what wasn't reported is that, according to our own inside sources, Tytion had recently been housed in Icon at Scotland Correctional before being moved to Southern Correctional shortly prior to his release. And for our viewers, Icon is solitary confinement.
For those that don't understand, Icon consists of a 6-month period where you're locked in a cell, a 8x10 cell for 23 hours a day. And you have no phone, no TV, no outside communication. You have ink, pen, paper if the officers give it to you, and a radio. You have very minimal stuff, and you might get a book if you're lucky. So you're locked in that cell with nothing but your thoughts and you. You can see no one. You barely can talk to anyone. So Icon is something that really takes a toll on the mental.
And Icon, you're locked down 24 hours, right? So you don't even get to go outside. Oh, okay. All right. 23 hours a day, and you only come out for a shower. That's not going outside, getting sunlight, or anything like that. I mean, I can see where there'd be this huge shock to go from that to being released to the outside world. I mean, it'd be like a fish out of water.
I mean, the mental brain is not meant to be isolated to that extent. You know what I mean? Like, we're not meant to be isolated where we have no human contact, nobody to talk to. It does take a toll. I know Craig, who works with disability rights, actually goes and monitors Icon, and he said he had to take 2 days off because of the stories that he heard. A lot of people in there be having seizures, and a seizure can kill you, and some of them are just left there to seize for God knows how long.
Oh my gosh.
And are just talking to themselves. People are seeing things, hearing things because you're in a state of psychosis.
Yeah. And studies even show that prolonged isolation can cause or worsen anxiety, paranoia, depression, and suicidal thoughts in the incarcerated. So, that's all something that someone that is in segregation is up against. They're having to fight against their own mind per se, in a situation like this.
Yes, and if our viewers really want to kind of subject yourself to what Icon would be like, get you a blow-up mattress and put in your bathtub, and you take your covers and put on that blow-up mattress and lock the door. Do not leave out of your bathroom 48 hours. All your meals are brought to the door, pass through the door, and you close the door back. You don't leave that room. You don't turn the lights off. You leave the lights on for 18 to 21 hours a day, and you turn them off for a very minimal amount of time. You only get one, maybe two books and a radio. You get you a couple pieces of stationery and some stamps and envelopes, and that's all you have. And you survive in there for 48 hours. If you can do it for 48 hours, imagine doing it for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and sometimes 5 years for other extenuated periods. So you can imagine the toll that this takes on a person's psychological and mental health, because when you're taken from that environment and put straight into the world around a fast-paced society, and you haven't even been socialized, re-socialized with normal people that you have been locked around for years.
And I just think social anxiety, when your social skills have been suppressed for so long, and then coming out in a world that's different. I mean, he was a young kid when he went in, and then coming out to how we live today, like everything's expensive, it's already hard to find a job. And so I think that a lot of the social anxiety, just sometimes a lot of people who come home from incarceration being out in public because you're so used to being in a confined area, everything is, you know, more like authoritarianized. When you're in prison, you're told to do A, B. You told them when to wake up, go to sleep, eat, use the bathroom, shower. So then when you get back out here and you have your freedom, it's hard to adapt to that because you've been, you've been institutionalized for so long, you can't. And so that just gives you anxiety in itself and can probably start giving you psychosis. And I think that that might have been what he was experiencing. And then not knowing how to accept the love of his aunt, because she seemed like she truly loved him, wanted the best for him, rooted for him, took him shopping, made videos about him. But I just don't think he could get used to that love and that social level because we have institutionalized him for so long. And I don't think people understand that once you're incarcerated, that's something your mind never forgets. The stuff that you experience and see inside of prison is something that you never forget. I mean, look at Daryl Hunt. Came out, did what he did, and then he ended up killing himself because overdosing, basically still killing himself because he could not get out the fact that he spent 30, 40 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. And he just could not overcome that trauma, which is post-incarceration syndrome, which is a form of PTSD.
Yeah. I think people don't understand the struggle for people to readjust to normal social settings after they're released from prison. They become hypervigilant, emotionally detached or impulsive, and the symptoms are directly linked to post-traumatic stress and sensory deprivation. I think people discredit that or don't really understand that people go through when they're released from prison.
Say the effect of the long-term confinement, you're losing that actual communication and connection with family members. There's a level of camaraderie and a bond that you need to have with family members and those that you're confined with to be considered human. It's just like if you took an animal and you lock an animal in the cage, and the only person that animal ever sees is the one that comes and feeds them. That animal is going to build camaraderie with that one person. But if you turn that animal loose, it will attack any other that it comes in contact with because it has no camaraderie. It has no understanding of anybody else. So this is the same thing that long-term confinement does to a human being. You lock this human being in a cell. You take away physical meal, physical pictures. You take away the element of talking to somebody on the telephone. If he was to receive a visitation, it's behind the glass and he's in full restraint. So that human element is gone. There is no physical element to this. So when a person is released from prison straight from confinement, even if you go to a program such as these step-down programs, these programs are still restrictive. These programs still deny you the mental, emotional, and physical contact and support that you need with family to build a meaningful bond. So when you get out there into society, like Sierra was talking about, and you come into a situation where somebody's asking you, hey, can you do this? Will you do this? Can you do this? And you're like, why are they trying to tell me what to do? I just left somewhere where they were telling me what to do. I've been laying in a cell for 6 months, sleeping and eating, somebody bringing me my food, somebody telling me when to go to the shower. They turning on my lights, turning off my lights. All I had to do is clean up my cell if I chose to clean up my cell. I didn't even have to get up and put on clothes if I didn't. Then you release this person to society, and now all this hits them like a ton of bricks. That is something that plays a psychological game that people don't realize, that it's so detrimental to a human being, and it can cause them to lash out violently, which in this case, Tatian did. Yeah. And he took a life, and he took his life because he didn't understand how to cope with the situation that he was placed in.
That's right.
And this comes from a lack of communication, a lack of being understood. Because even if you're communicating with someone on a daily basis, you can say things in a way that the person that's receiving it receives it in a manner that it wasn't meant. And that may be what happened in this situation, in this context. Somebody may have said something to him, and they weren't meaning it in the way that they transcribed it, but the way he received it was the only way he knew how to receive it, and he acted out. And then when he acted out, he became violent, and it cost him and his aunt their life.
So Tatian Burton, that incident took place on August of this year. 20 days later, another incident occurs that is widely publicized. Let's get into that incident, and that is the story of 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska and DeCarlos Brown Jr., the man accused of fatally stabbing her on a Charlotte rail train. It's a devastating example of how North Carolina's broken mental health and correctional systems intersect, and they fail time and time again. Brown, 33, had a long history of mental illness, diagnosed with schizophrenia, and had been in and out of North Carolina prison systems for years. His family repeatedly begged for help, telling doctors, police, and mental health providers that he was deteriorating and becoming more and more dangerous. But each agency in this seems to pass the responsibility to the other. And when they tried to have him committed, they were told he's not dangerous enough to be held. When he was arrested, police said it was a medical issue. When he sought help from hospitals, he was turned away because there was no psychiatric beds available. And when he did get admitted, he was only held for 14 days before being released without any long-term plan for treatment or supervision. This cycle of prison, release, relapse, crisis, arrest is what experts call the revolving door of neglect. It shows like the complete breakdown between corrections, healthcare, and community mental health services. This incident is something that I'm sure our viewers have heard about in the news and probably seen the videos, and it's very disturbing. But it kind of falls in the same line as the Tatian Burton incident, with the same kind of issues coming up relating to prison and mental health.
Yeah, that situation, I mean, you know, my heart goes out to her family. I don't know if they were over here when it happened, if they were, you know, back in Russia, but my heart goes out. I mean, she was just simply sitting there, you know, minding her business on her phone, and, you know, to get attacked from behind in that manner is awful. But schizophrenia is probably one of the worst of mental health conditions you can have, because you are hearing voices in your head. You know, I know there was a guy that was in beside my husband. Was he heard voices, and he heard voices telling him to do it and to do this and do that. And so I think that that is probably one of the worst mental health conditions you can have, because you're hearing, it's like you're hearing somebody telling you to do things that you shouldn't do. And
Yeah.
I know I heard that when he called his sister, he was like, I don't know what name he used, but he was like, such and such did it. It wasn't me, it was such and such. So that goes to show you there, he was
Hmm.
in a manic psychosis state of mind. He wasn't in a regular mind. And for, mental health to be like, oh, well, he's not dangerous enough. So you let him go, you wouldn't help him. And
Yeah.
then he goes out and he commits something like this, and then you want to take his life for it. It's crazy.
Yeah, and like you said, I think a
Yeah.
lot of people confuse it with like split personality. I wasn't that familiar with what schizophrenia was. I had to look it up and kind of research more, and it definitely says that it's like very different from split personality. Schizophrenia is more like a disconnection from reality rather than like
Hmm.
a split identity. Somebody that has schizophrenia, they're like experiencing hallucinations, delusions, and that's definitely what Brown mentioned that he was experiencing. He felt like there was something foreign in his body, and he kept talking about that over and over again. And the police calls, in the call with his sister about the incident that happened on the light rail. He constantly mentions these hallucinations and things that he thinks are going on with his body.
I mean, this type of thing is you're experiencing an out of body experience to the 10th degree, because what you're doing, you see yourself, but you see something else as well. It's either wise a demon, it's either wise another part of your person. It's, and these people, these things that you're seeing are speaking to you in your ear. It's like, you ever heard the proverbial saying, I got an angel and a devil on my shoulder? Who, with schizophrenia, that's what it is. It's like you got an angel on one side, the devil on the other side, and they're telling you, hey, one of them saying do this, the other one saying don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and they're telling you, hey, this person's fit to hurt you, and the angel's like, no, they're not, and it's a tug of war back and forth. When this man was locked up and he was committed to these mental health facilities and he did not receive the proper treatment, they done him a disadvantage. Society served him a disadvantage. And people can say what they want. But when you have somebody that voluntarily commits their family member and says, hey, he's broken, he's got a mental health issue that's got to be addressed, we need to address it. And they're refusing to. They just turn him loose and say, hey, we don't care. Go ahead. Take him back home. And then when this sickness, he's sick. Y'all got to understand, this man is sick. A mental health hospital is where you go to get help for your disease. Mental health is a disease, and it's an uncurable disease. It's an ongoing disease. So when you're fighting this disease and you go to the hospital, when you go to the hospital for a cold, they give you antibiotics. When you go to a hospital to have surgery, they perform the surgery. They make you better. When he come to the North Carolina State Department of Corrections for help, they failed him. They did not provide him with help. They released him back into the world and didn't give him no help. And so when he acts out, now the first thing you want to do is take his life. You deem him unrehabilitable because you say, oh, he's a schizophrenic. He's crazy. No, you failed him, and you don't want to admit that you failed him.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything to save this man's life, nor to save Irene. I mean, her blood is not only on this young man's hands, it's on all those institutions that failed this young man from a child all the way up to he was 30-some years old. That's who you have to look at here.
Yeah. And see, the thing with DeCarlos Brown, when I pull up his criminal history, the charges are one by one getting worse in severity. And solitary confinement, prison settings, they can drastically worsen schizophrenia symptoms. The environment, it offers no therapy or safe structure. It's just punishment, which kind of increases the paranoia and the distrust. So the people that enter prison with mild symptoms, they might leave with severe psychosis or trauma-related deterioration. But whenever you look at DeCarlos Brown, and he's constantly doing prison time, and not only are the charges getting worse, but it seems as his mental health is deteriorating more and more as he does this time. And I look at that and I say, how are more people not looking at this and seeing where the problem lies? Because I'm seeing a problem as, why did prison, North Carolina Department of Corrections, they're there for corrections. Why are they not helping him with his mental health, with getting him to where he's not doing these violent crimes? Like I said, his crimes got more and more violent as it went on. So it was like, it was a cry for help there. And it was not only a cry for help in the sense of what is in black and white, but also he's literally calling the police and begging for help multiple times, that he calls the police and says, help me, something's in my body. There's foreign particles in my body, and nothing's ever done to help him.
I think that just goes to show how mental health in America is not nowhere near where it should be. And we definitely know the corrections doesn't even have the keys to help. For one, they don't have staff. From what I'm hearing, they might see a psychologist once a month for 30 minutes, and a lot of the times the psychologists have to see 1,000 people. So imagine having a caseload with close to 1,000 people on, and you're trying to see everybody once a month. So I just think that goes to show the connection in between how America really hasn't understood how to treat mental health. I think DeCarlos was on medication, but a lot of times people take those type of medications and it makes them feel a certain way. So they don't want to take it because they don't want to feel slow, groggy. Sometimes medications can agitate the symptoms even worse. So I think that, and in my own experience, I've been in a mental health hospital or ER. To me, that experience was the most horrible experience. I have complex PTSD. So that was the worst experience that I've ever imagined. So I can imagine somebody having schizophrenia. Mental health hospitals are like prisons because you're basically in an all white room with no doors. You're in a turtle suit. You know what I'm saying? The TV is locked away if you have a TV in there. So you're in an all white room. So how is that helping your mental health? So in the same sense, mental health hospitals are no better than prisons. And so that goes to show that America has not done enough research and study how to heal mental health. Like I know now, they're doing where they hypnotize you or where they give you, I think it's like some type of mushroom that they give you that can kind of help heal some of your mental health situations, but exploring other options besides saying, here, take this pill.
Yeah.
Because I was taking like Seroquel and it was not, some people be like, oh, I'd be asleep for days on Seroquel. And I'm like, I've been up for 4 days. And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, he just kept upping my dose. Like he's like, well, we go up to 500. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not taking 500 milligrams of Seroquel. On top of, I had like 3 other medicines I was taking. It was starting to make my stomach upset. So I had to figure out a way myself naturally to help heal my mental health and my body. Mine got so bad where I started having non-epileptic seizures because I had so much trauma built up in my body.
Wow.
So sometimes traditional medicine and traditional mental health does not work for a lot of people. So I think that we really need to look more into depth of how we can help people without just giving them some medication. And then, it also goes to if you have healthcare. If you don't have healthcare, you can't get medicine. There's some people that go to jail because they can get medicated. And then when they come right back out, they can't get the medication. So they're back to square one. So it's like a loop that we are just constantly putting our people in with mental health issues.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of room for improvement in all these areas that we've touched on. Obviously, there's an issue. We're talking about 2 incidences that were 20 days apart, and we're going to get into a third one as well, and they're all kind of like stemming from the same issues, the same things that need to be addressed, and it gets kind of frustrating because whenever you look at these in the news and the headlines, the comments under it is always to respond with, more violence, more punishment,
Mm-hmm.
instead of how can we address the underlying issues here?
And as we've seen for 400 years or more, incarceration will never deter somebody. It will never stop the violence. You're just going to be warehousing whole communities here pretty soon. I mean, if you look at the prison population, you have geriatric people, which I don't understand why anybody geriatric should be in a prison who has Alzheimer's or any serious health issues. You have middle-aged people. Now you have children. So pretty soon there's not going to be anybody in the community because they're going to be all warehoused in a prison and locked away instead of us saying, well, what resources can we give these people so that we make sure we have our community in the community, that we have taxpayers that are paying taxes instead of being confined in a warehouse in a building where they're not receiving any mental health, they're not receiving any corrections or rehabilitation. Like,
Yeah.
why can't we look at the huge underlying issues of lack of resources in a lot of communities and how some people aren't able to get good paying jobs or able to buy houses because they can't get a good paying job or kept up under poverty lines for a lot of reasons. So I just think that instead of always meeting violence with violence and feel like incarceration is going to fix the problem, it hasn't fixed the problem.
Yeah.
So how are we going to move forward? Well, I think that we have to look at what the underlying cause is instead of looking at always using incarceration. Because if incarceration was to deter, rehabilitate, correct, then it wouldn't be stacked to the brim.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh,
So why can't we say, okay, well, what communities don't have the correct resources? What communities aren't able to have, like, there's a such thing as redlining. And if people don't know what redlining is a drawing of the map where certain communities have a lack of resources. One side of the town that I live on doesn't have a grocery store. Our grocery store is like 3 or 4 or 5 miles away. So you don't have good food. That's another thing that has a lot to do with your mental health is when you don't have good whole foods. You
yeah.
don't have resources to a job. You don't have public transportation. So why aren't we looking at how we can resource communities and how we can fix mental health in a holistic way that is helping people and not harming people?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, well, let's put them in jail, kill them, give them the
Yeah.
death penalty, like, and not knowing that you're talking about giving people the death penalty. That is your taxpaying dollars. That's not the governors. That's not the politicians that want these laws. That is your taxpaying dollars that come out of your check on federal and state dollars each time you get paid. So that's what you wanted to go to instead of going to your community. That's why you're paying high property taxes and everything else, high
Mm-hmm.
sales taxes. Like, are y'all not thinking about really this is your money that they're using instead of populating and helping so that we're all safe and whole?
Well, until the state decides to address the lack of care on both the inside and outside of correctional facilities, I think that we'll continue to see tragedies like these. These are preventable deaths, untreated trauma that is clearly being displayed. And this isn't a political issue either. I think that it's a human issue that needs to be addressed. And I think that once we address that, we'll see a difference. But until then, I think we're going to continue to see this type of issue out of our state, unfortunately.
Until we all sit down at the table and not just some of us. We all
Yeah.
have to sit down at the table and really talk about these issues. Whether we agree or disagree, it still needs to be talked about and understood.
So, Pig, before we get off this subject of mental health and schizophrenia, I wanted to ask, because you have such a long history of incarceration, while you were incarcerated, did you ever come across people with schizophrenia?
You have people, everybody, I feel, has some level of paranoia, schizophrenia. But then you see somebody with a heightened level. And these people are people that are not good to be around. I'm going to tell you about a situation that I experienced in 2008 while incarcerated. There was a young man brought into the pod. He was in fear. He thought everybody in the pod was going to jump on him. So another young man was sitting there with a towel over his head watching TV. This man just walked up to him, so he unscrewed the broom handle out of the broom. And he took the head of the push broom, and he took the head of that push broom, and he slapped inside the head. And when he slapped inside the head and he fell, he just stood back and looked at him and started laughing. He was like, I got you, devil. I got you. I got you, devil. I got you. It was apparent that he didn't know this man a bit more than the man in the movie, but he attacked this man because he was thinking this man was the devil. So the thing is, they knew this man had a mental health issue. They knew he suffered from paranoia schizophrenia.
And that's verbatim for how DeCarlos acted on that light rail train. Because he's seen sitting there kind of to himself. It looks like he's struggling mentally with something. That's how I thought. I mean, is that how you took it, Sierra, when you saw it?
Like he was going back and forth in his mind. Like you could tell something, that voice, as they say, that voice, and sometimes for them it's 2 and 3 voices, was talking to him.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely like in some kind of battle in his mind, and then out of nowhere, unprovoked, this girl sits down in front of him and he gets up and he slits her throat. And that's verbatim for what you're explaining that you saw take place in prison with schizophrenia.
And that is the norm. That is the norm, to have somebody act out in that manner. And the first thing they want to do, and this is when I was in prison, this was their method. Their method was to take them, put them in the hole, strip them down butt naked, and put them in a green suit. It's a padded suit. And they put them in the coldest room they can possibly put them in, with a plastic bed. And they'll chain them. They'll put handcuffs and shackles on them and leave them there for hours. There's no water in the room. There's no toilet in the room. And, you're sitting there and you got to use the restroom in the floor. You got to urinate in the floor. This is not a way to treat someone that's suffering from mental health.
Yeah.
This is not a way to treat anyone, but this is a way you would treat somebody that was disruptive. But somebody that's suffering from paranoia schizophrenia, somebody that's saying they're going to harm themselves because they're having a mental health breakdown. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I've seen men take razors and cut their arms, cut their main veins, and start pulling their veins out of their arms because they say something's inside of them and they got to get it out of them. And they take these men and take them to the hole and chain them down to a bed and restrain them with chains at all 4 points. They'll chain them down at their ankles and their wrists on a bed and leave them there. So this is not how you give somebody treatment. The way you give somebody treatment, you take them and you put them in an environment and you observe them. You allow them to re-socialize themselves. When you first come to prison, or when I first come to prison a long time ago, they used to give you an aptitude test. And they give you these colors and these different pictures to look at. And they ask you, what do you see when you look at these pictures? And this was designed to find out what is your mind triggering when you see certain colors and certain things and certain designs. And it was designed to pull out if you were mentally or emotionally distraught and if you were apt to act out in certain situations. They don't perform those tests anymore from what I understand. And then, the lack of mental health providers. The last time I was in prison, you had one mental health provider for 1,500 inmates.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And then you look at it like this now. If you're on lockup like this man, Tatian Burton was, the only thing the mental health provider is going to do is walk around once a month and ask the new arrivals that has been in there for 7 to 10 days if they're okay, if they have thoughts of suicide, of hurting themselves or anyone else. If they say no, they walk away. I mean, even if they did, you think they're going to just say, oh, yeah, I feel like killing myself today. No, they're going to tell you no. Are they planning to hurt somebody else? No, they're not. They're not going to tell you that. So my question is, why don't you pull each one of those people out like they did in the early stages of prison in the early 2000s? The mental health provider come around and pulled each man out. Mm-hmm. And you have 4 or 5 mental health providers. When you take these taxpayer dollars, like Sierra was speaking about a while ago, to commit murder in the name of justice, rather than to heal a person from a sickness and a disease that they carry from birth to death, because it is their duty to give them the proper treatment they need. So you're cutting funding here. Take doctors out of prison. Take mental health staff out of prison. Don't give them the proper treatment they need. Return them back to society and let society deal with them. Then when they act out in society, let's condemn them to death. That's what they done with Carlos. Yes, Irene lost her life, and that's a sad situation. But again, I will say, I feel like the blood of Irene is not only on the hands of Carlos.
Yeah.
It's also on the hands of the judicial system, the justice system that failed him, the doctors that failed him over the years, the lack of giving him the treatment that he needed at the pivotal time that he needed it to save not only him, but also this young lady. Because if they would have admitted him into one of these hospitals, that young lady's life would have been saved, no doubt about it.
I wanted to bring light to the judge that received fire about letting him go.
Okay.
I think that judge understood that jail and prison was not a place for him. Now, I think that they should have done was did a injunction for him to go in the hospital and make the hospital take him, because they can't do those. But I think that the judge understood that that was not going to help him. Being incarcerated, being locked up was not going to help his schizophrenia. And that's right. So I'm sad that that judge got so much backlash from politicians. You know, now they have a law where, you know, they can get sanctioned and stuff can happen to them if they let people go. But I understand why. And I just want to bring that to the forefront, because that judge received a lot of backlash. I don't know if I think they tried to send her to the judiciary committee to have her sanctioned or reprimanded or whatever, he or she, I can't remember which one it was. But that's probably why, because they understood that he had a serious mental health issue that neither jail or prison was going to help him.
Yeah. And, you know, as Sierra said, and as I said a while ago, if you incarcerate someone, you can keep them in a box for the rest of their life, but that does not cure the problem. You got to put these people in hospitals. You got to open up Broughton. You got to open up Dorfield. You got to open up these facilities that the state has closed down in the name of cutting funds to open up more prisons. They changed prisons from prisons to institutions to allow to put these types of people that suffer from mental health conditions into the prisons rather than having Broughton, rather than having Dorfield. That's why they closed those places down and turned these into correctional institutions. So what you got to understand here, ladies and gentlemen, is they have played an evil trick, and they are serving a disadvantage to every young man and every young woman that suffers from a mental health disease. As we looked up, me and April done some research, and we asked, did North Carolina provide an outlet of mental health hospitals for offenders? And they actually have to be offenders. They cannot be voluntarily committed and put in these hospitals. They actually have to have extensive mental health issues that the state of North Carolina deems, hey, we can't take care of them. We're going to send them to this mental health hospital. And if y'all listen to one of our previous episodes about Eric that his mom done, and the hardship his mom's going through trying to get him the proper treatment right now to get in one of these mental health hospitals, ladies and gentlemen, you just see what the state of North Carolina is serving to our people. Injustice is on top of injustice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, after the incident on the light rail train in Charlotte, a little more than a month later, another incident happens here in North Carolina, in Southport, of all places. So, the Southport, North Carolina mass shooting that left 3 people dead and 5 injured was allegedly carried out by 40-year-old Marine veteran Nigel Edge, a man who once served his country and returned home carrying invisible wounds. Edge was a U.S. Marine Deployed to Iraq in 2006, he reportedly sustained multiple traumatic brain injuries and was later classified as 100% disabled due to combat-related trauma. But despite that diagnosis, like many veterans, he appears to have fallen through the cracks of a mental health system that often focuses on compensation rather than comprehensive care. And by the time of the shooting, Edge was isolated, disconnected, and struggling. His injuries and trauma, untreated or mismanaged, the tragedy that followed is a chilling example of how unaddressed trauma can manifest into violence, despair, and tragedy, whether that trauma comes from the battlefield or behind prison walls. We definitely need to get into this conversation because there's a lot of similarities between combat veterans and the trauma that incarcerated individuals sustain while incarcerated.
Well, first of all, I want to say something that I want to point out something that they said in that article that we have been talking about repetitively throughout this interview. They failed to provide the young man with comprehensive treatment. They focused on giving him money rather than giving him the treatment that he needed. And this goes right back to where we're at in the state of North Carolina penitentiary. This goes right back to where we're at with these jails and institutions. Titan Burton was denied proper mental health treatment. Carlos, he was denied proper mental health treatment. Now you got Nigel, an ex-Marine, denied proper mental health treatment. Yes, Nigel received compensation. Titan and Carlos didn't receive nothing but a trip back to society to become the best version of themselves they possibly could be. And they were all three sick. They all three suffered from one like disease, mental health. And nobody took notice. Everybody might have been like, oh, something's wrong with them, but who took notice? Who took the time to properly evaluate them, diagnose them, and get them the comprehensive treatment they needed?
Yeah.
Nobody. That's why all three of these men, one of them's in the grave. The other two's on their way to spending the rest of their life in prison, if not dying, and there could have been several lives saved by using preventative measures of comprehensive treatment. And that's something that I want to point out. And I keep saying this, comprehensive treatment. We need facilities, whether it's for veterans in the military or whether it's inmates coming out of prison. They all suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. In prison, you may suffer from getting in fights and getting jumped on. You may suffer from officers beating you brutally. You may suffer from just waking up every day confined. You may suffer from the fact that you're locked in a cell 23 hours a day with no outlet to get out. You may suffer from the fact that you are disconnected from your family and friends and loved ones for months and years, and you lose the actual humanistic bond that you share with these people.
Yeah.
And that's traumatizing. That psychological development is something that you cannot erase. And Sierra said something earlier about this. Once you are traumatized, once you experience trauma, I don't care who it is, whether you're a rape victim, whether you're somebody that's been robbed, somebody that's been shot at, whether you've been locked in the prisons, whether you've been beat, you can never erase that trauma from your mind, so you have to live with it.
Yeah.
And when you live with it, you become a shell of yourself and you become isolated, as they talked about Nigel becoming. And the same way it looked as Carlos was on that train. And I'm pretty sure the way Tyson become before he took his life and his aunt's life.
Yeah, and with these recent events, it definitely made me want to compare the veteran trauma versus the inmate trauma. And, both are two different paths, obviously, but after comparing them, it seems like they might be two different paths, but one core problem. Like veterans on one side, they're going to experience combat trauma, of course. They're going to have exposure to death. They're going to experience explosions and moral injuries, whereas the incarcerated individual is going to experience environmental trauma, violence, dehumanization, and extreme isolation, but they're also going to have that exposure to death. Doing this podcast and talking with the incarcerated, there has been instances where we've talked about the violence that goes on behind those walls. And we've even had people that have had access to phones on the inside that were able to capture video footage of situations of violence that were able to send it to us. And some of them were so bad we could not even put them in a video to air them. I could not even watch the whole video because it was so violent. So incarcerated individuals are on a level that I think that a lot of people don't realize. So then let's talk about veterans. They can develop PTSD, depression, substance use, or traumatic brain injuries after service. Then the incarcerated individuals, they develop PTSD as well. They can develop psychosis, anxiety, complex trauma while in custody, especially if they're experiencing segregation, solitary confinement. So very similar things there. Veterans are often honored for their service, but stigmatized when the symptoms lead to aggression or substance use or instability. They want to be honored when things are looking good, but when that veteran starts having mental health issues, that's when they start being shed in a different light. Whereas the incarcerated are criminalized rather than treated when trauma causes behavioral issues. They're seen as dangerous. They're not seen as damaged. They're just seen as less than human, somebody not worthy of treatment or help. The veterans, system, it offers limited care and long time waits and medication focused treatment for them. There's a lot of room for improvement for veteran care, sadly. Incarcerated individuals in the prison systems, they lack adequate psychiatric staff or therapy or care, and they often rely on punishment for symptoms. Anytime somebody in the prison system does something wrong, they're punished, whether it's due to a medical issue or not.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you take a moment and you look inside the prison and you look around, you would be amazed at how many veterans are inside your prison and institution. You would be amazed at how many men and women that serve this country that turn to the VA for help was denied help, and then they turn to substance abuse. They turn to drinking or doing other drugs, drinking alcohol or doing other drugs, and that subsequently ended them up in the penitentiary. And then when they get to the penitentiary, there is no help for them in the penitentiary. So now these same people that served our country, that accumulated these mental health issues for laying their life on the line for our country, now they're criminalized and they become the prisoner. And that's when society looks at them with a black eye, looks down on them, when they didn't say, hey, well, what made this person do this? What turned this person to commit this crime? It's the lack of treatment. It's the lack of attention to detail. And the detail is they suffer. And whether it's a child, because these young men, Carlos didn't just wake up one day and say he was bipolar schizophrenic. We don't know about Titan. Nigel, he sustained his in the military at war, from what we understand. But whether you sustain it serving your country, or whether you come into this world, whether you're one of God's great creations, if God created you like that, where is it right and wrong? When is it right to give them proper Medicare and help? And when is it wrong? When is it right to fail these men and women? And when is it wrong?
Yeah.
It's never wrong. It's always right to do right by these people, because They have no other outlet. And they're taking your taxpaying dollars to pay for this, but they're putting it in the name of criminal justice and tough on crime.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was reading a little bit about Nigel, and he was having delusions as well. He actually changed his name in 2023 to, I think he called himself Sean, is what he changed his name to. And he said he changed his name because he wanted to basically start a new life. He felt like his family was against him. So he was having delusions as well. He has filed numerous lawsuits in the courts in the Wilmington area. He was actually shot 4 times in Iraq while they were doing an Operation Sting warehouse. He was shot 4 times and said he was left for dead. You serve your country because you think it's the right thing to do. You know, a lot of people go to the military because they feel like it, you know, it can make them mature as a man. And then you go on these missions, and he served a few in Iraq from what I'm looking at from an article that I see. In 2026 and 2005 and 2006, he was a part of the Operation Iraq Freedom and was also awarded a Purple Heart medal given to those wounded and killed in action. So he was shot 4 times in an operation in Iraq, shot in the head. And I'm sure once he got his release for having an injury and not being able to continue to serve, it all falls down. Like when you're in military, everything's good. You're getting paid. You're getting good benefits. You're getting seen. But as soon as you have an honorable discharge, it falls down. Like that's why they're homeless. They don't. The VA is always stacked because you have to go to the VA. You can't go to any other hospital. Like certain situations, you have to go to the VA, which sometimes is hours away from you. On top of you get there and you're sitting hours on hours. Sometimes you can't even get seen that day. You have to come back. Your appointments are months and months apart. So there's a lot of lacking when it comes to the VA hospital and care. And so he was experiencing delusion. So he could have had a form of schizophrenia and PTSD. When you're in a battle situation, you're going to a foreign country that operates differently than you, and every day you're hearing grenades go off and bombs and a bunch of shooting, that shocks your system. It shocks your brain, it shocks your nervous system. And so that lives in your body. And so you come back over here, but that damage is already done to your mind. And then on top of him getting shot 4 times and saying he was left for dead in Iraq, in a country where you're not liked, you're foreign to them.
Yeah.
They think you're the enemy. Like that mentally messed up his brain for the rest of his life. And so they said that the day before he tried to shoot, but he was interrupted. So he had already had in his mind, and he could have had a flashback that he was in Iraq, and those people on the dock was people in Iraq. Like I think people forget that you can have a flashback and that's your reality. And so I think that was his reality. But I think what we want to touch on is the fact that the different responses of his situation and Carlos's situation, like the comments were totally different. Like they sympathized for him, but Carlos, they didn't sympathize with him. And so we can't, it's like you buy the two sides of the apple and one is spoiled. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't pick and choose what you give sympathy to, because a lot of people now are suffering from mental health. So it should be the reaction. Everybody should have got sympathy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you want to give sympathy, everybody should have got sympathy. But Carlos got hate and death, and Nigel's there like, oh, well, he had PTSD. He was a Marine. And basically masking what he did.
Yeah.
But Carlos, it was different.
Yeah, and I think that though veterans and incarcerated individuals, they might come from very different walks of life. They both experience this chronic exposure to fear, the loss of control, the psychological injury that fundamentally changes how the brain processes safety and trust. And in both groups, they suffer from hypervigilance, like nightmares and emotional numbness, and both also have suicide rates far above the national average. And they both return to society stigmatized and unsupportive in most cases. For veterans, you hear a lot of times they're unstable. Inmates, you're often given this sense of they're unworthy, they put themselves in this position. And there's this disconnect between the two and what they both experience in life and how that experience molds them and shapes their mind and the triggers that come from it. Whether it's a Marine returning from war or a man released from solitary confinement, both are forced to navigate life after trauma without meaningful rehabilitation or community reintegration. So, there's a lot to unpack there when we're talking about comparing the two. But there's a lot of similarities, a lot of astounding similarities.
And, to touch on what Sierra just stated, for the Carlos, they want to condemn him out the gate or give him the death penalty. For this other guy, they're saying, oh, well, he had PTSD. He had brain injuries. Well, I understand this man was shot in the head. He sustained these brain injuries at war. The Carlos come into this world out of his mother's womb with these situations. So now they both acted out in a manner that's violent. They took lives. And that's never acceptable in no society. But if it's good enough for one, why is it not good enough for the other? We're not looking at the whole picture here, because when your brain has trauma to it, whether it's trauma from a war or whether it's trauma that you were born with, you were brought into this world, whether it's Titan, we don't know what his was, but these are undiscovered, unrooted out situations, because now Nigel, he's going to be in the same place as DeCarlos and Titan was. And now that he's in that same situation, what's going to happen? Where is he going to be taken? What is going to be done with him?
Yeah.
Is he going to get the help and the treatment that he needs? Because we know that these other two young men didn't receive the treatment and the help they needed, and they've been in the state of North Carolina incarcerated. They were failed, and they come out and they acted out. Now, what is going to happen with Nigel? I mean, Nigel still has family. Nigel's country owes him something. So now, is he going to get the proper medical treatment that he needs? Because we know DeCarlos ain't, because he's never had it. Yeah. From a child all the way up till this moment right now, he's never had it. We know Titan never got it, because the young man and his aunt would still be here today.
Yeah.
So what about Nigel? Is he going to get his? And I'm willing to bet $1 to a donut hole that he won't get his. And that is where the system is failing. The system is failing because it fails to address the matter at hand. Research shows that the longer someone is incarcerated, the more damaging it can be to their mental health. Everybody in prison experiences painful conditions while in prison. And when they leave, they experience symptoms that resemble post-traumatic stress disorder. So if Nigel is already suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and he comes to prison and he experiences more trauma, do you think his post-traumatic stress disorder is going to go down, or is it going to elevate? Is he going to be a harm and a danger to officers or prison staff, doctors, inmates, someone's family, a young man that might be getting ready to go home in 10, 15 days that is unknowing that this man is sick and something happens? Is DeCarlos going to get, if God forbid, I pray that this man doesn't receive the death penalty, because I feel like, which I know in my heart, and the Constitution forbids them killing somebody that's mental health incompetent to stand trial. So therefore, if they do that, they're violating the human rights and constitutional law. But anyway, Carlos, is he going to be a danger to himself or someone else? We know Titan Burton was. He was a danger to himself and his aunt, because he took both lives. When is it going to stop? When's it going to stop? When are they going to the treatment that they need? When are they going to start saving lives?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think that's what we really want to leave with the people is, it takes a community, it takes a village, and so it takes all of us to, help our neighbors be better people. And if they're suffering through something, be there, because a lot of people suffer in silence because they feel like they're going to be judged, they're going to be talked about, they're going to look at like they're different. And so, it takes the community as well understanding these issues. And a lot of people are so detached. When you're not confronted with the situation, you're detached from it until it happens to you. And it can happen to any of us. And so I think that's why it's important to be compassionate to everybody, because especially just in the environment America right now, a lot of people are suffering mental health issues. I mean, so we have to start looking at solutions that truly work, that will keep the community safe. And incarceration has never kept us safe. It will never keep us safe. And other countries understand that. Like Norway understands that. That's why when people come into prison there, they start with a plan. They start with your mental health plan. They start with your reentry plan. And on top of that, when you go into prison, you are connected with your correctional officer. They talk to you like you're human. They have a human living environment. Like they're not in concrete cells with a bunch of metal doors clinking and clacking behind them. They have livable space where they have windows, and when they go outside, it's greenery. It's not fences with barbed wire and people standing in the unit at the top with guns just in case you try to escape. Like it's a more human connection. And until America can understand that, we will always be the bottom tier.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Well, I think this conversation has definitely reminded us that whether trauma comes from combat or confinement, its impact is the same, and it's destroying lives, as we can see. Titian, DeCarlos, and Nigel each represent a system that failed to see the warning signs until it was too late. These aren't just stories of tragedy, they're calls for accountability, compassion, and reform. Our veterans fought for us. Our incarcerated loved ones are still fighting within broken systems. Both deserve healing, not more suffering. I think that we definitely need to keep the pressure on and keep this conversation going, because the moment we stop talking about it, people will keep dying in silence. Until next time, this is Inmate Tea with AMP and
Sierra from Black Light Mass Incarceration,
where we're spilling the tea on the truth, honor the lost, and we fight for the living.